Hello and welcome to another episode of wjlive, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Michael Austin, a supervising reporter here at the Western Journal, and with me today is Abby Liebing, one of the minions on my reporting team.
Yeah, I'm just his underling.
Just my underling.
Just a servant.
There's only two of us on the show today because apparently everyone else was too lazy to come into the office.
It's Friday. It's Friday. What can they do?
It's Friday. Anyway. So you know, there's basically one big story that we wanted to bring to you guys. We wanted to dig into the subtext, dig into everything that's going on, and that's the story of Leah Thomas. We have a NCAA champion of women's swimming, and guess what? It's a man. And so this video has now been censored by YouTube.
Yes.
We have just violated all of the hate speech guidelines for Google, YouTube, and a plethora of other media platforms.
We just abuse the trans community.
Yeah.
Deeply.
But really, I think one of the reasons we wanted to bring you guys this story today is because that is literally true. We cannot say that sentence without breaking all of the rules of the establishment, social media outlets.
Right.
They're going to do everything to restrict people from saying these sorts of things. But we're going to continue saying them here at the Western Journal. And, we hope that you guys respect that we're going to suffer intentionally here just to bring you the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, these are broader ethical, moral truths that we're communicating.
Yeah.
And this is not a policy or cultural issue. This is an issue of actual human beings and morality.
Yeah. So people haven't been a fan of Leah Thomas throughout this whole escapade since he decided to start swimming with women. And this was especially the case at the championships. I don't know exactly how the swimming
I think it was
competitions
the
go.
championships. Yeah.
Anyway, he just won. So yeah, it was the championship.
Well, he didn't just win. He blasted everyone else out of the water by 4 seconds, which if you know anything about swimming, that is a shattering, that's beating someone by a mile in track or something. So it's very clear, the dominance was, there was
thorough.
no doubt.
And, you could see from the audience reaction that, the majority is not into this. You know, people, if you watch, nobody applauded when he finished one of his races. Everyone held their applause for the second place. A woman.
Yeah. Everyone was really
everyone
on
started
that.
cheering for second place, for third place, but for those 4 seconds that he was ahead, just silence, crickets. There was also a point towards the beginning of one of Thomas's races where somebody just started screaming out, "Cheater! Cheater!"
Cheater.
And literally everyone was like, "Yeah, that's pretty much right."
There seemed to be a really widespread. It wasn't just, a couple of the crazy people. It's nope, there was pretty widespread, even if people are not necessarily, I'm anti Leah Thomas and trans, it was there's definitely question and hesitation of is this fair?
Well, and we'll probably get into this a little more later, but we're starting to see that divide where you have, a contingent of people that is pro-trans, but they're seeing the biological realities of what's happening in women's sports right now. It's what a coincidence that trans athletes who probably make up far under 1%, probably 1% of 1% of athletes, happen to be sweeping up so many championships.
What a thought. Who would have ever predicted that?
In high school track, this is happening a lot. I think there was a story where it was happening in wrestling, which is pretty disturbing.
Yeah, I've seen that in wrestling, swimming, track. Where else?
Yeah. All of the big ones. Oh, I remember there was a story. There was at a small college, maybe, NAIA or D2 or D3, there was a 6'4" dude that was he looked like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the court because nobody was tall enough to stop him. But
savage.
There's a biological reality to this that people just can't ignore anymore.
No.
The trans movement's really starting to become, I think, unpopular among the average American citizen. And I think a lot of these swimmers, these women's swimmers that he's going up against, I wouldn't be surprised if 2-3 years ago they would be all for inclusion of trans athletes. A lot of these women, but now they're not.
They're like, absolutely not.
And we have this fantastic interview that really tells you what's going on in the heads of a lot of these girls, a lot of these women. And we're going to play that interview for you right now. This is a girl that she got tracked down kind of at the championship. So
you're a Virginia Tech swimmer. What did you think about Leah Thomas competing today as a swimmer in this competition? What are you feeling? What are other athletes feeling?
It's a common conception that we are all very disappointed and frustrated with someone who has capabilities more than us women have to be able to compete at this level and take opportunities away from other women. Like, I have a teammate who did not make finals today because she was just bumped out of finals, and it's heartbreaking to see someone who went through puberty as a male and has the body of a male be able to absolutely blow away the competition, and you go into it with a mindset that you don't have a chance, if that makes sense. Like, it's hard to compete against someone with the aerobic capacity, the muscle development, the body of a man. It's hard. It's hard to think about it like that. And staying positive, I bet, for other swimmers who are in that heat is probably overwhelming. I'm not sure. I can't speak for them, but it's disappointing to see and frustrating, definitely.
And you said that one of your teammates was crying today because she didn't make the finals. You said that she was 17th,
yes,
and there were 16 spots.
Yes.
So Leah Thomas took one of those spots. Talk to us about what your teammate was going through and that experience.
She was very emotional, and it's hard to see because it's her last NCAAs, and she really loves that race, and it was just heartbreaking to see that she put all her effort into it today and went the best time that she's went in a morning session before and still not make it back. It's hard to see someone who works every day, every night, still not be able to compete against someone like that.
Wow.
Sad.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten to a point as a country now where we're allowing, the voices of 10%, 5% of the community make all of these decisions for all of us,
right,
that affect all of us.
It's the tyranny of the minority.
Tyranny of the minority, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, if you look at it from kind of a statistic standpoint, the trans community and, I mean, the LGBT community broadly makes up a tiny, tiny, tiny percent of the entire nation. And yet they are just, it's like the rest of society is just being held hostage to stick to the claims, and everything that is spoken against LGBT is hate speech. And it's an absolute, if any other group did this, if white people, the pariahs of our society, did this, I mean, there'd be genocide.
Yeah.
But nobody cares. I mean, if it's a properly suppressed minority, then they have full reign to just run rampant over every atmosphere in society.
I think one of the reasons that they've been allowed to get away with this for as long as they have is because this media disinformation coming from all these establishment outlets has skewed kind of everyone's views. So there was this poll that just went out, I don't know, a week or two ago, or at least I saw it a few days ago for the first time, that the average American overestimates how big a lot of minority populations were. Mm-hmm. So, the number of transgender individuals is somewhere like 1% of the population, or under that, or around that. And people estimated it was like 20 to 25, somewhere in there.
Wow, jeez.
So
wow.
Something like 15 to 20 to 25, somewhere in that range. Just vastly overestimating that. So if you see all of this pro-trans propaganda in the news all the time, you're going to think that, these people make up a huge percentage of the country. And then you're not going to be as willing to stand up against it when you think, oh, well, I'm not really in the overwhelming majority on this.
Right. Right. And I feel like it's kind of become the common myth that, like everyone has those, like every other friend of yours is gay or trans.
Right.
I remember when I lived on the East Coast, it was like kind of a common saying of like, oh, well, we all have that one relative that, has a different sexual identity than us. I was like, actually, statistically, that's completely false.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's 100% right. And yeah, it's just hard to... It's hard to imagine this going on much longer. Like I think people, especially when you look at the reaction that they were having to Leah or William, however you want to.
Yeah, however you.
There's another demonetization right there. I just dead named
We're
someone.
docked.
I didn't even think about it.
Oops. We've used wrong pronouns, wrong names. I mean, we are really running amok here.
But yeah, I mean, unless there's more pushback, you're going to see more and more of this. You're going to see more average to actually funny enough, when you look at Leo when he was when you look at William Thomas's record with swimming, he actually was pretty accomplished. I actually looked at his records.
As a man, he actually, it's not like he was one of the weak men in swimming who was falling behind and then decided to go become a woman.
Right.
Like, he was doing fine.
Yeah, and he was still ranked, whatever, I don't know, 100-something, 300-something. I
Right.
mean, he wasn't ranked towards the top of, the sport, the entire NCAA, but he was really accomplished.
Yeah.
And now, people are saying that he's able to succeed. There's going to be other male athletes that just decide, well, I can become a national champion. I can become a top 10 finalist.
Yeah, you can get more scholarships.
More scholarships.
Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of financial incentives with that,
Exactly.
too. Yeah.
Which the financial incentives for a transgender man, woman, a man that becomes a woman, is really clear. But also, I think that's where the rubber is going to kind of hit the road with a lot of people, because when you bring money and your kids' scholarship and future and livelihood in sports into the question, you're going to get a lot more pushback. It's one thing to be like, oh, use the proper pronouns in your workplace. It's another thing when you have a man coming and taking a scholarship from your daughter.
Well, that's what we just saw in Virginia, is that when you run on a pro-family, protect your kids, protect your family kind of platform, then people start to get involved in politics.
Exactly.
A funny thing that I just thought of while you were talking about that is it's kind of, I mean, it's obvious to us, but it's hilarious to think if you don't accept that there's differences between men and women. It's interesting that all of these transgender women are dominating women's sports, but I have never seen one transgender man compete effectively in any men's sport ever. I have not seen that.
I wonder why. Maybe it's because men and women are different.
Maybe that's the case. But, I think a lot of feminists have sort of created this problem and brought this problem on themselves.
Oh, and now they're undermining themselves.
I mean, you've seen with the women's soccer team, with the NWA, or WNBA, NWA. Uh-oh.
A little dyslexic there.
Sorry, Ice. Sorry, guys. With the WNBA, all these athletes are saying, oh, we should get paid just as much as the men get paid, because we're just putting in the same amount of work. It's just as good of a product. Actually, it's not. Sorry.
Actually.
But you asked, you know what? You wanted to be treated like a man? How about we put a bunch of men in your sport and let's see how that goes.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, the feminist movement has been completely undermined by the trans movement.
Yes.
And the feminist movement, it's that vicious circle of feminist movement gave birth to the trans and LGBT movement, because it's like, as soon as you demand equality, society would be like, here it is. And then once you're kind of checked off, a lot of people are like, all right, women now equal to men, taking care of that problem. Now moving on to the next minority, which is trans. And all of a sudden, all these women are like, uh-oh, what have we done?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the problem to me, it's been this conflation of what equality is versus what equity is. So, like, the idea out there is that what equality looks like is we have the same level of success, the same everything. Mm-hmm. It's not and to get there, you cannot treat people the same because people are different.
Exactly.
So they want us all to be treated differently, and that's what's really destroying women's sports. And honestly, that's what feminism has done to destroy women's everything. In general.
Exactly, because people are demanding that they be treated the same way, but then they turn right back around and say, in this rampant individualism, that you have to be very wary of every single person's capabilities and sensibilities and emotions, and it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And if you can't have both of those things.
Yes.
And what they've done is they've tried to adopt both of radically individual as well as radical equality, and how people are treated exactly like we're all the same human. And guess what? That doesn't work.
And too often, to me, conservatives think that the issue is we're trying to feminize men, we're trying to make men more like women. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but that is not the issue.
That's like a symptom. Yeah. That's a side issue.
It's really the opposite is what's going on, is that, feminism from its inception, modern day feminism, one of the mothers of modern day feminism, Simone de Beauvoir, she did an interview where she said, if women women, if left to their own devices, will not leave the house and pursue careers as often as men do.
Yeah.
So it's our job to force them to leave. It's society's job to force
that's a great
women
idea.
to start acting like men. And we've sort of done that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've absolutely done that, where it's gotten to a point that even women who are, more conservatively grounded, Christian worldview, build up guilt complexes about not having a career. Like, it's weird to be like, oh, I want a different path, maybe a mother and a wife or something like that. And where all of a sudden, even within yourself, I as a woman can speak to this as a conservative Christian woman, where it's like, oh my goodness, is there something wrong with me if I decide that? If I don't, aggressively pursue a career, am I doing something wrong? Am I not being a powerful woman?
And, what you're starting to see, and I know this from some of the women in my life, and I know this because I've listened to people like Jordan Peterson talk about it. And what you're starting to see a little bit of is these, you got career-driven women that they abandon the whole idea of having a family for the first several decades of their lives. They commit themselves to politics, or not politics, to careers, to politics as well, to their career, and then there gets to be a point at 30, 35, 40 where it's like, oh, okay, now I want a family. It's like, well, unfortunately, not everyone is like, Hollywood, they run a lot of stories about how Hollywood celebrities will have a kid at 40.
Yeah.
That's not the most realistic thing in the world, believe it or not. And the biological, clocks for men and women are very different. And let's look, if I think that if you want to be a career-driven woman, if you want to spend your time doing that, more power to you. That could very well be the best decision for you.
Right. Just know that there are sacrifices.
Yes. You can't go back. You can't take it back once you've done it.
Yeah. Everything has sacrifices. Every good thing requires sacrifices. You can be doing very good things, still require sacrifice of things that are also good. And that's just the curse of being human. That's just something we are so taught in our culture by Hollywood and everything that you can have it all. It's actually impossible. You cannot. And that is a really, really harsh reality for women biologically.
Yeah.
It is for men too, but it's a little different for women. And it's just a lie to think that you can have it all.
Yeah. And the media's lying to you, the establishment's lying to you. This is a big choice that we're all going to have to make, and too many people seem to be regretting it after it's too late. So,
and that is the sad story of, people regret it. They live resentful lives then. And realistically, sometimes I'm like, well, maybe if enough resentment and regret builds up among individuals, it'll change and correct course in society. But I mean, man, are we fed lies?
And as we're looking forward here, for possible, how are we going to get out of this mess? How are we going to get to a place where men actually aren't allowed to compete in women's sports again? Mm-hmm. I'm probably a little more optimistic than most people. I think one of the things working against this movement right now, hardcore, is that you're starting to see a huge split and a lot of infighting between feminism and the trans movement. And they used to be, in lockstep, and now they've come completely against. You cannot be a feminist. Watch a dude that looks like he's 6'5". He's listed at 6'1", but that he looks really tall. Watch that dude dominate, and then go like, oh yeah, I'm also for trans rights, and I'm for erasing women from all female achievements.
Right. I mean, it's just insane. And so when you have kind of that, identity politics infighting. Yeah. I mean, it's a messy situation. Things could come out worse, but also it's kind of a promising, maybe a weakening sign of both movements. Which is good, hopefully. Yeah.
I mean, we'll find out in the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to start to see, if everything starts going red, that's a total rebuke of this stuff. It's obviously there's a little more going on than that. But in terms of what's driving people to vote, how people won Virginia, how people are talking about why it seems like there's going to be a red wave coming up. Seems like a lot of this cultural stuff is what's driving it.
Oh, absolutely.
If that movement is big enough, if it's strong enough to just turn as much red as possible, okay, Democrats are going to be in retreat mode. Leftists are going to lose their institutional power. That's the path out of it to me.
Right. Well, and I think, I mean, from a broader philosophical standpoint, when
Yeah.
it comes down to politics, cynically, I do kind of believe in the idea of, at the end of the day, most people are really selfish. And so people are going to do what's in their best interest. And usually what's in your best interest is pursuing something that is stable, that is affluent, that will make you money, stability, peace, which is, kind of the American dream. And at the end of the day, American politics, the conservative movement, is leaning that way of like, actually, if you're conservative and, in the midst of these culture wars, the conservative voice is more, this is the route to go if you want peace, stability, and wealth.
Yeah, and I agree that I think most people are, self-interests, incentives like that are what drive human behavior the most. But I don't think, the way we frame that too often is that that's people being selfish. But I think sometimes the best thing you can do for society is just kind of work from the inside out.
Yeah.
So the best, you're not going to be a help to society if you are a mess of a human being. Your family's not going to be a plus to society if that's not put together. Your surrounding community, and then that circle of influence grows. So the fact, I think a lot of people are going to have that kind of self-interested motivation, and because this is affecting their children, I mean, we're going to see some movement on that.
Right, and it will change people's minds. When it starts affecting you personally, you're like, oh, how am I going to respond to this at a personal community level? And
for me, these trans issues, the destruction, the erasure of women from it's not just sports. They're literally elevating, Woman of the Year was
this is all over the place.
Man of the Year is still a man, but Woman of the Year, that's how you know that they're attacking women and not men.
Unbelievable.
But as they're erasing, I get that they're erasing women from all these categories, but the larger concern to me is not necessarily the destruction of women and womanhood, even though that's a huge issue, but actually, the trans individuals themselves and what this has meant to the trans community.
Oh yeah.
You have individuals that often have super high suicide rates.
Yes.
Kids below the age of consent that have no idea what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman and what it means to take hormone therapy and become infertile. All of these things, they don't have the capacity to make those decisions. And, this pro-positive movement, seeing Leah Thomas dominate, in the NCAA, it's like, what a hero to some of these people. Like, oh, that person didn't feel like they were in their right body.
Right.
They were allowed to go be what they wanted to be and do what they wanted to do. And now they're a hero. And I think too many kids who are confused, okay? They're not men trapped in, they're not girls trapped in boys' bodies. They're not boys trapped in girls' bodies. They're confused about their sex. There's a lot of different reasons why I think somebody can have gender dysphoria. I don't think it's just mental illness, as a lot of conservatives like to say. There's the fad element to it.
There's definitely.
Oddly enough, I challenge you guys to look back at kind of, the people you knew in high school and in college and back in your life. I hear the same thing from everyone I talk to about this. The people I used to know that ended up becoming trans, it's all the same type of people. It's the people that were lonely. They were a bit of social outcasts.
Yeah.
They didn't quite have that identity. They were a little awkward. They tended to be a little more unattractive than the average person. And I don't mean that in a hurtful or mean way. That's just the reality of it. They didn't know how to interact with others in a social environment. And a lot of those people, they're looking for a meaning, they're looking for a purpose, and then, they don't know who they are as a person. They're looking to find that, and then they see Leah Thomas, and they're like, oh, hey, I'm a man in a woman's body.
I'll adopt that. Yeah, the trans and LGBT community, it's commonly known, just has a huge battle against mental health.
Yes.
High suicide rates, high depression, which like you said, it makes sense. If you're waking up every day of your life unsure of yourself, and you're asking, who am I? What am I?
Right.
You're going to run into serious issues within yourself, and then your own identity and your own psyche and your brain and everything about you is going to be really, really damaged.
And you got the medical community supporting, gender affirming treatment, treatment that just whatever they say they need, give it to them.
Right.
And basing that off of a bunch of studies that do not take into effect enough variables, a bunch of studies that are not long form studies. They ask these people, 6 months, they ask them a few days after their surgery, oh, how do you feel now? Do you feel less depressed? Of course they feel less depressed like 3 days, 6 months later.
Yeah.
The only longitudinal studies they've done where it's like, several years out, all of those mental illnesses come back into the fold. And then, I've read a lot of literature on these studies, by the way, so that's what I'm talking. I know what I'm talking about. The excuse, the retort to that has often been, oh, well, it's because they're being bullied, they're not accepted by society. But it's not bullying. It is not bullying itself. It's correlated with mental illness, but that's not what drives mental illness up. It's actually, and a lot of these studies say this, it's the perception that one is being bullied.
Exactly.
And what exacerbates the perception that you're being bullied, the perception that you're not accepted by society more than CNN getting on TV and saying trans people will never be accepted by society.
You are not accepted.
Yeah.
Then it creates an entire psyche of bullying. I was actually just before this, I was reading a story she was a domestic abuse survivor, and she was talking about how the trans movement very much on a psychological standpoint moves along the lines of how an abuser thinks. Of very bullying, very lack of confidence. So you feel like you have to lash out at other people. And then there's no sort of address, if you are feeling bullied, this is very common among domestic abuse survivors. You're not being given, here's how to react to it. It's no. Everyone else is the problem. You're not the problem.
Right.
It would be like your therapist saying, instead of, learning how to stand up and, be confident, it's like, no, it's not your problem. Everyone else has to stop being mean. And it completely isolates you. And that's literally the thinking of the trans movement is it abuses, it adopts a very abusive psychology to move its agenda forward.
No, and that's, you see that's a pretty common theme with most of the agendas put forward by that crowd.
Right.
Over on the far left. And hey, whatever, alt-right, whatever, they have zero institutional control, but let's do a whataboutism and say that too.
Yeah.
I think, is there anything else we wanted to go over before we wrap this puppy up?
I don't know. We could talk all day.
No, I mean,
big
I
issues.
think the last point that I would say is just that, when someone says, I'm a man, I am a woman trapped in a man's body, that always hits me as so, crazy, not just for the obvious reasons, but, it's being a woman is not just the stereotypes of being a woman. Being a woman is something that I and other men will never be able to fathom under any circumstances. You can only know that if you have all of the, all of the variables that go into making a woman.
If you are a woman.
But really though, it's and this is why those mental illnesses never go away, because no matter how you change your body, you could change every molecule of that body, but you will never feel like a woman. Like you will, you can't just do some of the disgusting things they do in sex change procedures and then just say, well, then that's a woman. Like, no, you'll never know. And deep down, these people know that they will never be the other sex. And that's why they never get better.
Exactly. It's just, it's damaging them irrevocably, sadly.
Yeah. And on that utterly depressing note.
Yeah, that was dark. Sorry.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of WJ Live that probably will only get seen by a couple hundred people before it gets pulled down permanently and we both get thrown in shackles for hate speech and
getting canceled right and left all day long.
But really, thank you guys so much for supporting us, for watching. Make sure you head over. If you really, really want to help us out, you want to do us a huge favor, you want to help out an organization that's willing to say these things, knowing that there's serious consequences coming from big tech, please go to westernjournal.com/join. When you subscribe directly to us, it helps us circumvent all of that. We don't have to worry about them blocking us off all their platforms. You're getting the news straight from us. So please consider doing that. Consider subscribing to us on YouTube at youtube.com/wjlive. And again, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.